out of which the final drawdown and build-up was the longest, 11 hours and 12.5 hours respectively. We used the final build-up for our analysis due to the fact it had the longest duration plus the largest number of data points to carry out a proper analysis on them. So the well H2, if you look at the derivative plateau, these were set depending the derivative plateau exactly matched our pay zone thickness and the permeability we had already provided. And in the late time region, actually, I kind of apologize, there was actually marked it out. We actually marked it out the middle time and the late time region. The late time region probably has it's double the slope of the middle time region, so it gives a signature of single fault present in that region. X3 had two well test analysis carried out in the same year. The simplest of explanation for that is, if you can see, the first well test analysis has pretty less data points compared to the second well test analysis. It's much more spread out, it's much more a detailed analysis that they carried out. Yes, in the first set you can see it's again double the slope, but then the slope starts decreasing, giving a signature of a leaking fault present there. Alright. On the other hand, in the second set we tried actually to use a quick match model available from PAN system, which was a closed system reservoir with one of the sides taken as a constant boundary, and we get a perfect match with that, to be exact. Well, X6, one factor that I would like to point out here is that none of these wells had a wellbore storage in the early time region given to us. We believe that a sand phase valve was actually installed, due to which we don't see any wellbore storage effect in these well tests. Whereas in X6, there's a pretty decent wellbore storage effect seen here in the early time region, followed by a very small middle time and then a late time region here. Yeah. So the middle time region, the LTR has half the slope of the middle time region, showing a channelized flow. One possible interpretation that we have, that the overall final build-up wasn't carried out for very long. So if it would have continued, we would have possibly seen signs of either channelized flow or a confirmation that if the fault is sealing or a leaking fault, to be exact. This was there's a mistake here. I apologize for it. This is supposed to be X5 or X6. X6 is here, to be exact. This was the first X6, and there is another X6 well test carried out later in that year. And this was pretty different compared to all the other well test analysis carried out. You can see it just starts with a very low middle time region, and then it just dips towards the late time region. The thing is, the signature that we see here in the late time region is of giving of a derivative rollover. All right. Again, the final buildup hasn't been run long enough, but if you use the quick match model, it should have given a trend that falls down, confirming a possibility of derivative rollover taking place. So again, if these well test analysis were run much more for a longer duration, we would have a confirmation of this model. The second test again had a wellbore storage initially, all right, and then a unit slope in the late time region. This normally indicates recharging of the reservoir taking place, possibly due to the fact that there is a leaking fault present there, and leaking fault present that connects one aquifer to another aquifer, due to which it recharges. Now I'll be moving on to reservoir simulation. Since we had the three analysis carried out and the possible position of our faults and the reservoir fluid properties that we had, we used spectral to make our reservoir model. We use synthetic faults to distribute flow units, which in this case is fascies. Fascies made in Pectoral is quite different from the geological fascies. Pectoral takes it as flow units rather than the geological markers. We used sequential Gaussian distribution to distribute our fascies, and this is an image of the final fascies created. The major factor about sequential Gaussian distribution is it allows you to play around with the radiogram, which helps you in letting you set a weightage of how your sand units should spread out from your appraisal wells, and that's how we control this. Since it was also mentioned by On in his section that we have a shallow marine depositional environment, so we use a radiogram from one of the previous researches carried out in the northern North Sea. This is how we made a fascies log using the synthetic logs we created. You can see we have divided into 5 different sand units, and used it again back with the sequential Gaussian distribution to distribute our fascies. One of the major factors that affects the reservoir model is the distribution of the relative permeability. In our case, we have 2 sets of relative permeability data provided to us for different sand bodies itself. Set B was seen to have a capillary pressure that was 50 times greater than set A, whereas their relative permeability did not change at all. Only there was a difference between the capillary pressure. The assumption that we have, we assume that it can either be a total measurement error that might have happened, or a different measurement technique was used in order to measure those capillary pressures. These are the relative permeability data that we actually had put in Petrel and allotted to our 4 different sand bodies used. We had a choice to use deterministic methods also in order to distribute our fascies, permeability and porosity. But there's a major error in this. I'll try to explain you the two of them. Moving average and closest were the other 2 options. Moving average tends to average permeability from one appraisal well to another, giving an unrealistic spread throughout the layers, whereas closest tries to relate the appraisal wells. So the thing is, we use neither of them because they are normally used in scenarios where we have a lot of appraisal wells with us. In our case, we only had 6 appraisal wells. Again, since we were only certain about Since we were only certain about the reservoir near our appraisal wells, we've used sequential Gaussian distribution to distribute our permeability and porosity. This was a model grid, 166,000 cells, X cells at X direction we had 49 cells, Y direction 51, and Z direction 1800 layers, with a maximum fineness in the Z direction 18 feet, since we were correlating with the logs. These were our simulation cases where our base case had 20 producers and 19 water injectors. All of these cases had these constant values. Producers VHP was 3000 psi, production at 20,000 barrels, and maximum water cut set at 98%. The base case gives us a gas production of 180 million standard cubic feet of gas. We re-inject this gas since no flaring is allowed due to environmental regulations. Our best case is model 4. Which has in total of 11 producers, 8 water injectors, and 1 gas injector placed right at the crest of the reservoir. You'll see we'll have in the FOPR, the field oil production rate, we have a peak oil flow in this region, whereas later on decreases. And yes, oh, I'll move on.
We're going to look at the drilling section of our FDP project. Starting with the drill rig selection, we just selected jack-up type rig, which is suitable and available in North Sea environment. And looking at the geology, we don't have any data about the geology above the reservoir section. We just assume the standard Brentfield for our lithology assumptions above the reservoir section. And the bore pressures also assumed from the Brentfield, and it is got matched with the sedimentary errors. And here is the bore pressure, and the casing setting depths are also matched with the bore pressure. The second red line is the ore balance which we predicted for our drilling operation. The minimum ore balance we said is 200 psi per foot. This is the clear view of our casing setting depths. And coming to the cementing sections, in cementing we choose cements which are suitable for our depths and lithologies and also which are not harmful for the environment. And the setting top of cement is 300 feet into the previous casing, and for conductive and surface casing it is up to the surface. This is a well trajectory. The first build-up of our well is 1 degree per 100 foot to achieve the tangential angle of 38 degree, and the second build-up is 8 degree per 100 foot to reach the maximum of 6,535 feet in our reservoir section. Coming to the drill bit selection, drill bit is selected based on the rate of penetration we want, based on the type of formation to be drilled and the bit run time. The drill bit which is selected is an iron-graded aggressive form of PDC, which is suitable for the North Sea environment, and it is tested and gave a good result in the North Sea environment. The main advantages are we can run through the entire section in a single well, so dipping time is reduced. This is the new technology which we use in our project. The leading edge geosteering, which has a highest rate of penetration among all other geosteering technologies, and it gives real-time monitoring system, real-time data to the onshore, and we can use this to assure the trajectory of the hole, and there is no need to stop drilling to make the geosteering decisions. And this is the drilling schedule we got from the cluster. We just plan to drill a gas injector at the first half of the year. That is because of we can't explore the gas into the environment due to some environmental effects. And we just drill 2 producers and 4 producers in the first year. These data are given from the cluster. Yeah. Coming to the reservoir monitoring management, the main objectives of reservoir monitoring is to optimize production, to predict upcoming problems, to increase the recovery. To increase the recovery is the main objective of the reservoir monitoring. The activities include measuring of the pressure and temperature of the reservoir, flow rates, changing gas oil ratio, moving oil water contact, water depth, sand production controlling. These are the main objectives of our reservoir monitoring. The risk analysis. The main risk we are going to encounter in our drilling project is geological risk while controlling the well. The geological risk including the earthquakes, the weather conditions and all. The risk in well controlling like hits, mud loss to the formation, the possible human errors that can happen in the project. And coming to the risk and mitigation, these are all the risks, the usual risks which we encounter while drilling. Consider the decreased flow. And consider the decreased flow, we are using a water-based mud in our whole drilling project. So using water-based mud may cause the scale formation into the drill pipe. So by chemical injection it can be mitigated. That's it from the discussion.
Good afternoon everyone. My name is Shabazz. I'll be presenting the production part of the project. This is a summary of what I'll be talking about. Basically, for the initial recovery, which we used was the natural depletion. We allowed the well to deplete naturally once the wells were drilled, up to a point when they stopped flowing, which was around the water cut of 37% and bottom hole pressure around 3,000 psi. After that, we used an artificial lift. In our case, it was an ESP. Because it's an offshore project, we try to make the completion in one go, so we avoid any well interventions or any workover because it's very costly. So we installed the ESP initially. And the platform that was used was chosen according to the location, which was 30 meters of depth of water, and the flow rate which was used. The riser diameter we got from the production analysis, which came to be around 21 inches, as you can see. We had a separator as a processing unit for separating the liquid that was produced, which contained a GOR of around 500 standard cubic feet per barrel. Yeah, and that was separated in 3 stages. So we want to completely separate the gas, the water, and the oil. The gas was used to re-inject into reservoir as well as the water. And the monitoring equipment we used was the multi-phase